everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Death in Cambodia, Life in America, Season 3. Season 3 honestly has been so much fun lately, interviewing just different experts from different industries. Today, I am presenting to you an amazing guest, Soreath Hok. So, Soreath is a multimedia journalist with experience in radio, television, digital production, and in 2022, she was a National Edward R. Murrow Award winner. Super fancy, guys. And she worked for KVPR, where she was able to report on Cambodian American mental health issues affecting the community and the survivors in the 70s. At her time there, she also completed a 5-part series. And in 2022, she was participating in the California Fellowship with the USC Annenberg Center for Health Journalism. Also, after that, 2023, she participated in the Rosalind Carter Fellowship for Mental Health Journalism. So overall, guys, media gal, and definitely reported on the very, very important topic of mental health of Cambodian Americans. I am so excited to have you on. Soreath, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Dorothy. I'm so excited to be here.
So, before we get into kind of all the amazing journalism work that you have done, why don't we take it way back to the beginning, Soreath? So, what generation are you? And how? Talk to me about the childhood. Talk to me about the very, very beginnings.
Sure, I guess I've always had this love affair with media, because I was always home by myself and I only had the TV to to kind of keep me company, and so that kind of became like my shining beacon of what I wanted to do, and I never really knew how to get into it. Just being an immigrant kid, my folks were refugees. They survived the genocide. I was born in Khao Dang, one of the main camps there in Thailand, and so I'm a 1.5 generation.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I kind of bridged that gap between the older generation and the younger generation. And I always spoke Cambodian with my parents, but then also really got to just know American culture so well, having come to the country at such a young age. I was 2 years old when we landed in LA. And growing up, just always watching TV and kind of idolizing that. um, I just it wasn't until college, actually, when I realized that I I just love to read and write, and I decided to major in English. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really know what I was going to do with it. And the turning point was when I found out that my college had a radio station. This is Fresno State. I was living in Fresno at the time, and I just love music too. And so they hired me to be an on-air DJ, and I was like this quiet, shy Asian kid. And so I was on the air, like playing music and trying to, like get song requests and stuff like that. But I think having that practice of speaking to this void, just kind of like what we were doing almost, and um, having that practice kind of gave me the courage to go like, okay, you know what? I really like production, and I want to keep going into this. And it was because of my radio experience in college that I was able to get my first job in actual media outside of college, and that was in the TV industry. So I started working in news, um, right around college era, and I was a producer for TV. So I was never in front of the camera, but I was always writing all the stuff behind the scenes. And yeah, I just produced local newscasts. I did that for a long time.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
yeah. So it was like I jumped from, radio to TV. I took a big long break from media after about like a decade in TV, and then got back into reporting and radio right around the pandemic. So that's how I kind of got back into it. It was like this full circle kind of moment.
Yeah. Do you attribute to do you attribute kind of the direction that you took to your experience in Kaohsiung, or I guess was it always just a passion of yours?
Media has always just been something that's spoken to me. I think, coming to a country where you're always feeling like an outsider,
Yeah.
um, TV was kind of the apex, right? And that's kind of what I grew up with, and I think in the back of my head, I was always like, if I can do something that I feel passionate about, um, that that is gonna that's gonna keep me going. If I got a job doing anything else that I didn't really feel passionate about, it would have never worked out. So I was lucky in that my parents kind of let me pursue the things that I wanted to figure out and do. They gave me the freedom to do that, and yeah, we're just supportive of me trying new things, and so yeah, they've kind of seen the progression.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost rare to, I feel like, for that generation to be accepting of going into career of the arts because at least from my personal experience, it was always been, you're either going to be it was always the hard sciences that you should get into, whether it be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or something of that nature. So it's amazing that your parents were accepting of that.
They weren't at first because um, they wanted me to be a doctor at first. And
Hmm.
that was actually what I started doing when I first got to college. I majored in biology thinking, oh, I'm going to go into pre-med and, I'll figure it out. And I hated it. I not only did I hate it, but I failed at it. And it was like all the bad grades was like enough to turn me around and go, okay, I cannot do something I'm not into. And so
Right.
that was what made me make that shift, and they understood that.
Yeah, yeah. Remind me again, you said so you were born in Kaohsiung, and do you have any memories of that time when you were there?
Unfortunately, I don't. We just have photos of me hanging out in the dirt.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, and I have a lot of stories that my parents have told me. But just, yeah, I don't actually have any memories because it was around when I was 1.5 that we moved out of Calidong and went to the camp in the Philippines where they basically trained you to come to America. They like
hmm,
taught you basic English skills and stuff like that. So I think we were there for about 6 months, and by the time we were flown out to the U.S., I was only 2 years old. So my first memories were of being a little kid in LA.
yeah, yeah. And how was your experience being an immigrant kid in LA?
It really was. I think it was great in LA because there were so many other immigrant kids. That I didn't feel like that different. I went to school with a lot of kids that were in kind of the same social class. So, we're all kind of poor. We didn't really know English all that well. And we're all black and brown kids, but yeah, it was really fun growing up in LA during that time. It was when we moved out of LA that things became more difficult where I wasn't surrounded by that kind of same social circle.
Right, right. Yeah, everybody has, depending on where you grew up or where your sponsors were, have very, very different upbringings, because I've even this past weekend I was mentioning to you before this call that I was doing this meetup in New York, and there were people who had their sponsors in like Rhode Island and Virginia and all these places that really there isn't an Asian prominence there. So, I'm glad that really that experience kind of, supplemented. So I know from there in LA, you moved out to where and at what age?
Yeah, so it was a really weird jump after that because my parents got into the donut industry very early on, and they thought that opening a location in LA was going to be too crowded because, well, it was. There was a lot happening there, and so we actually moved out to Kern County. in this little town called Tehachapi. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Um,
Mm-mm.
but it's like this little town in Kern County, and it snows there, and it was not very diverse at all. And so it was a total 180 from being in the heart of LA, Echo Park, and then it's just this cold, lonely place.
Yeah.
And
What a
yeah, not
stark difference.
yeah, yeah, not knowing anybody. And yeah, that was where they started their first business, and we stayed there, and then we eventually moved back to LA. I lived in like Burbank, I lived in Valencia after that, kind of moving with their businesses.
Hmm.
And then eventually found our way to Fresno, which is right in the middle of California, in the Central Valley. And they continued all their business ventures here, but we moved to Fresno because a lot of my dad's family is here, so we had a network of relatives, aunts and uncles.
Right.
And yeah, I've kind of been here ever since. I made a little detour out to Sacramento when I was kind of figuring out my career, um, outside of Fresno, but then I came right back during the pandemic.
Right. Right. So you did high school, and going back to the topic of journalism and radio, you found your passion behind that and you started a career there. How was kind of the trajectory of your career, and what did you find you were um, reporting most on? And then secondly, just where did you really find your passion to report specifically on Cambodian Americans?
Sure. Yeah, I'll kind of, I guess, talk about how the journalism trajectory started.
Mhm.
Being in TV and being a producer is a very, very different experience than being a reporter, where you're out gathering the story, you're talking to people. I was kind of like always in a newsroom all day, and gathering information and writing it. Um, so that was really great production experience, and something that's kind of just been a foundation on what I've been able to know and understand about production. Um, but once I took a long break from that, and got back into journalism, it was actually kind of a funny story about how I got back into journalism, because when I moved back to Fresno, I just posted on social media like, "Hey guys, I'm back. Come see
Mhm.
me at the donut shop," because I was working there. And one of the people who saw it was actually my first radio station manager when I was in college. He
Ah,
was the general manager of the NPR station in Fresno at the time.
oh wow.
So it really was like this full circle moment. And he was like, we're looking for a new reporter. If you want to, look into the position or whatever. And I was like, yeah, and I'd never reported before. I'd
Mhm.
maybe done a couple stories here or there when I was uh, doing TV stuff, but um, they decided to take a gamble on somebody who had never been an actual reporter on the ground before. And they gave me a recorder and a microphone, and they just pushed me out the door. And I had to kind of learn everything all at once, like how to, the nuances of capturing audio, not just like interviews, but like sound to tell a
Mhm.
story.
Right.
And then editing that. Luckily, I was, I already was really familiar with editing, but audio editing is just a different beast.
Right.
And so yeah, like that, I spent a few years really understanding the craft, and seeing storytelling in a new way, and in a way to tell it through audio, which is it's really fascinating, and something I still want to continue doing in the future.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, it was, I was reporting on a lot of kind of political stories, government stories. So, I would sit in on a lot of city council meetings and school board meetings. And, it seems boring, but there are ways to make the stories interesting and kind of break out of those meetings, and catch up with people and tell deeper stories. And I decided to start reporting on Cambodian mental health, especially for refugees, just because of my own personal experience. There was a time when I was kind of in between journalism that I needed a side gig, and one of those side gigs was to work as an interpreter. And
Mm,
so, they sent me out to um, social services, medical appointments, that kind of stuff. And I would meet a lot of other Cambodian elders that were just not in my family network.
right.
And it was through meeting them at these appointments that um, I really saw how much people were still affected by the genocide. I mean, in so many ways that I never understood just from seeing it from my own family. Um, these were people that had serious psychiatric issues, emotional trauma, physical ailments that were still scars from what they survived. And it was affecting them in their day to day, now. And that experience was, it really took me back, and made me realize that it was such a bigger issue
Hmm.
that I never really put into scope. My parents have talked about it. I know that the genocide was something that happened, but I didn't know the far-reaching impacts of it into the modern day, and that interpreting experience. That was really what opened my eyes. I mean, the very first appointment I went to was to a family where a man who he kept having PTSD nightmares, and he would wake up in the middle of the night and basically point his gun at his family.
Oh,
You know, like it was crazy because he was still dreaming about the Khmer Rouge
wow.
and having these flashbacks. And it came to a point where police had to be called, and they didn't know what to do with him because he didn't speak English. They didn't understand what trauma, like mental trauma, can do to a person that
Right.
holds it for that many decades. And, they end up arresting him and further traumatizing him, not understanding the issue. And that was such a harrowing experience for me to even try to interpret what was happening. And I mean, every appointment was like that. It was just like some crazy incident that made me realize how serious this was for our culture.
And just to
And
clarify, you're interpreting for who exactly and what department exactly? Like,
I was interpreting for like the county health department,
I see.
or the behavioral health department, people who needed to go in to check in with like a healthcare provider to maybe get new medications or something like that.
Okay.
So yeah, I was the intermediary between them and the healthcare provider.
Okay. So yeah, you truly are seeing all sorts of different scenarios coming. Um, was it after that first interpretation that you felt like was the first time you really felt like you saw the issue that was happening?
Yeah, yeah, because my family, I don't think they want to pass on a lot of that stuff to me, and so I never really heard stories like that made me realize like, oh, they could be seriously negatively impacted. And I had to see it on the outside, through a third party almost kind of lens. And yeah, and it stuck with me. That story stuck with me. And it was at a point in my life where I couldn't really do anything with it because I didn't have a way to tell that story. And so, but it always just stayed with me. And it was when I began my actual reporting job back in radio. One of my mentors, he suggested that I apply for the USC mental health fellowship, because I had talked to him before about this story about how I was really interested in digging more into it. And And he's like, you should apply for this fellowship and see where it goes. And I got that first one. Yeah, and it just allowed me to um, have a platform to tell that story, to do some research, and to talk to people in the community, and to find some solutions.
Right. Just for clarification, what is the fellowship for, and what do you get out of it after going through the program?
So the fellowship is for USC has a school for mental health called the USC Annenberg Center for Mental Health, and every year they select a number of fellows from California to work on mental health issues that are affecting the state. And so people choose their topics, and basically you have access to a whole community of resources, people within the healthcare, mental health care industry,
Mm,
who are experts in various fields, and you get guidance on kind of how to tell the story that you want to tell,
mm,
editing help, kind of all kinds of resources that are within the reach of USC that they can provide. And we got like a small stipend, to be able to have travel expenses and stuff like that. um and then, yeah, and they basically, it's a way for them to kind of continue getting the grants that they need to get to keep doing these fellowships. And so, yeah, they I was able to work on a series of stories for that first fellowship.
So so this fellowship basically gives you the resources so that you can report correctly and in the proper way when it comes to talking about mental health in the news space field. Is that correct?
Right, yes, they would have, like online Zooms all the time on different topics about how to report on mental health. Maybe one topic would be how to kind of deal with trauma,
Mhm.
while you're reporting, kind of, yeah, different kind of guidance and resources that reporters can draw on to tell the story that they need to tell.
Right. What was your biggest takeaway or your big learning lesson from that fellowship?
That one was really production heavy, I think,
Mhm,
because I had so many interviews and so many stories, and that was really just how to manage my time
mhm.
and get those things out. I remember like how much I celebrated when I finally posted the last one because it was such a long process of because you're writing, you're going out to gather, and then you're um having to take in all the information and then actually write a scripted story out of it, and then it's mixing it and creating those stories and then writing the digital piece. So it was a lot of moving different pieces,
Right.
and so it was, a lot of it was time management because I still had my regular job to do,
Mhm.
while I was doing this. I
Right.
still had to report on my city council stories, and I was also working with my family at the donut shop on the weekend. So it was like, a 7 day a week venture.
Yeah, yeah. Tough.
And yeah, so, yeah, it was, I think the biggest thing was like, okay, maybe I was a bit ambitious with this one, but, um, I really loved how it turned out. I really did. I made so many great relationships out of that fellowship, and had such a great experience, and just delving deeply into a topic that I had been wanting to touch on for so long. So it was really a privilege, such an honor.
Mhm, mhm. So the news, and I know that you are known for, one, you won that amazing award. Was
Thank
that
you.
coming from something out of that fellowship, or was it something else that you did after?
Yeah, that was a separate story. That was actually a story that I was working on with the mentor who suggested I apply for the fellowship. So,
I see.
yeah, he and I have a great relationship. He's kind of given me a lot of opportunities and resources, and that was an investigative story that we did about school attendance during the pandemic. So it was sifting
Mhm.
through tons of tons of school district data and trying to figure out a story from it. And putting in public records requests and stuff like that. So yeah, that was just an amazing experience. I learned so much from him. He's one of the best investigative reporters I know, and really helped me kind of craft that story. And what a huge surprise when that award came. That was amazing.
That's amazing. So, at what point, Surya, in your career, did you decide, okay, it is time for me to really focus on highlighting Cambodian Americans? I know that from your experience of interpreting, um, a lot of these elder generations really have fueled that. But what was that process like? And I'm curious if it was a hard journey to really pitch those types of topics to news and media.
Yeah. You know, it was a story that stayed with me, and once I realized that I had the opportunity to be able to tell that story, I mean, I just jumped on it right away.
Mhm,
That first fellowship was really just opened the gates to so many ideas. Um, as far as the pitch, the industry has been so supportive and receptive to it, because the thing is, they know how underrepresented Cambodian Americans are in the media. I mean, that
mhm.
doesn't, you know, that is so apparent. I myself have never met another Cambodian journalist in the I don't know how many years I've been reporting and being in the industry, but it's a rare thing. And so to have a person who is from that culture be able to tell that story just as you are, I mean, that's everything. That's everything. So they recognize the importance of that right away and have always been really supportive of it, and know that it's a story that needs to be told, and have respected the fact that it needs to be told from somebody with a perspective like us, right? And
Yeah.
so the pitch is never a gate opener for opportunities.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. If only we had any maybe 5, 10, 15 more Cambodian reporters out there, then, maybe then we'd be able to see the media that the community deserves.
Yeah, it's a scary industry to get into, because let's face it, we didn't grow up with people to look at, with that
Yeah.
kind of experience. And I know from getting into it that I went into it being surrounded by a lot of veterans in the industry who were, maybe not nice all the time,
Yeah.
um, and maybe not as welcoming all the time of like a young Asian kid, Um, but I was just like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to push through and I'm going to learn how to speak up, because I came into it being very quiet and shy. And so I think I used my work as a way to kind of build my confidence. And um and so I can understand why it can be daunting, but I think in the age of social media now, I mean, what you're doing, I love what you're doing, and I admire it so much. And I think that has just opened up a whole nother avenue for people like us. So
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, no, I mean, kudos to you as well, and I'm gonna be honest, I really don't know any other Cambodian reporters or anybody in media out there. It's so true. So, going back to the articles that you have written about Cambodians' mental health, Cambodian Americans, I know that there are some really popular ones that you have written. I know for NPR, so like Health and Healing for Cambodian Survivors. Um, Tell me a little bit about that and why kind of like just the process and the reception of these articles that you've written as well.
sure. Yeah, I had to kind of think of a story arc,
Mhm.
in kind of concepting what this series was going to be. And that was, first of all, introducing what the issue was, what the problem was.
Right.
And one of the issues I had was even finding relevant, studies that had even been conducted in a recent time. The first one I found was a study in 2005. It's like 20 years ago was when they really, sat down with people and conducted a study on Cambodian refugees. 90% of refugees knew a family or friend who was murdered in the Khmer Rouge. 90%. Imagine knowing a family or a friend who was murdered. 99% experienced starvation. So, we're dealing with heavy stuff. And I had to, kind of introduce the problem. And then I had to find my subjects, which luckily I knew some really, great people here in Fresno, some prominent community members who were more than willing to talk.
Mm.
Um, One of them was Danny Kim, who's actually a police sergeant here in Fresno, and he just, knows everybody and everybody knows him. And I knew that if I could focus the story on him, um, it would get a lot of attention because everybody knew him in the community. And he was just a great champion for that kind of story. So, yeah, he talked about his experience. He was born, when it really happened. So he was a toddler during the stay at the camps. But he had his own issues with trying to transition to the US at the age of 11, with not really speaking English, which is a whole nother issue that, has led to so many problems in our community, people just starting at a farther point in the starting line, right?
Right.
Um, and but his sister, she was actually one of the child laborers. Um, so I interviewed her about her experience in having to be isolated from her family and the hardworking conditions, and interviewing her. She was my first real interview for the series. It was very emotional for her. She was crying, and I didn't really even know how to handle, that kind of trauma reporting.
Right.
I wanted to be very, very sensitive to it,
Right.
because you're dredging up really bad memories. And, but she was at the end happy that she got to share her story. Um, and, so I'm introducing the problem. I'm talking about the subjects who are, have experienced the problem. And I wanted to find, a program that's been a solution. And I was lucky to find a program in Oakland called CERI, CERI, which stands for the Center for Empowering Refugees and Immigrants. And they have been active for over 20 years, helping Cambodian refugees, specifically dealing with the trauma from PTSD from the genocide.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it was amazing to spend a lot of time out there with them to see exactly how this program works, and how elders, aunts, and uncles, that we would know anywhere, come in to benefit from it. And so, that was an amazing part of the series. And, another part of the series was really like, okay, if programs like this are not available everywhere, which they really aren't. I mean, that's the only one
Hmm.
that I know of.
Yep.
Um, what are people doing? How are they kind of dealing with this trauma that's obviously sitting with them? And the answer was really, in our community temples. Uh, that is the place where people can gather to kind of find that spiritual peace, and have community. Community has really been a big, big part of the healing process.
Hmm. Hmm. And how was that? How was this article received? I feel like this probably was maybe the first time for a lot of people hearing about this existing problem and what Cambodians deal with here, I would assume. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really well received, really well received. The community, was able to just kind of see themselves in it.
Right.
especially because so much of it was based in Fresno.
Mm-hmm.
But then Siri also shared it within their network, and they were really proud that we were able to showcase all the program, but also the clients, the people who are benefiting from it.
Right.
Um, and then it won an award, another Edward R. Murrow Award, a regional award. And yeah, so it was a really great series. It's really well received and supported.
Yeah. Yeah. Did it feel like after that had come out, you had a passion to write more about the topic?
Yeah, definitely. Because my mentor Aaron was like, "You should apply for another fellowship."
Let's keep it going.
so yeah, I applied for the Rosalind Carter Fellowship for Mental Health, which that's just been a whole nother blessing, to be connected to the Carter family in that way. um, Having had their support, not just through the program, but yeah, just being connected to their family story,
Right.
um, through what we went through.
Right.
So yeah, it was an amazing experience to be able to do like another kind of the story I did for them was really focused more on our intergenerational trauma, and how it can kind of be passed down to younger generations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was able to focus on a family in Fresno to kind of illustrate that.
Yeah, I know you have another article that did really that you're really known for. It's the Rosalind Carter helped me and thousands of other Cambodian refugees. Is that the one that you're referring to?
Yeah, yeah, it was through that fellowship. I was really connected to one of Rosalind Carter's main aides that she worked with during her time in the White House, and her name was Kathy, and she helped to kind of shepherd me through this retelling of how Mrs. Carter was really involved in helping refugees, and that was that just like we're seeing in Gaza right now, she saw what was happening on TV, all the people that went over crossing the border, and the condition that they were in, all of our ancestors, right? And she decided to actually fly over there in a war zone, and help um, understand what was first of all going on, what the problem was, and then come back to the U.S. with a plan of action. And
Right.
one of the things that she did was to launch a national aid campaign, which raised in 1980 $70 million, which all went to the camps and helped
Mm-hmm.
again me as a baby,
Mm-hmm.
all of our ancestors, and yeah, provided food, clothing, and set us up to survive as best that we could in the conditions that we were in. So she really walked the walk. She didn't just talk the talk. And I found out about this story, this kind of forgotten story, through my fellowship there.
Mm-hmm.
So when she passed, that's when I knew that I had to come out with that story and make sure that it was told, and to honor her for what she did.
Yeah, I actually had a uh, stringer. That's what he called himself, who I had interviewed as a guest on this podcast, and he was reporting on site when Rosalind Carter landed. And it's just very crazy to think about the influence that these people can have truly in helping when times like a genocide happens. Um, he had mentioned as well that her presence there, even just the fact that she flew over and landed there, brought in
Yeah,
so much more journalists and news and, commotion, attention essentially towards the issue that was happening in, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. And that is extremely helpful. As you said, how many millions of dollars that really came flooding in from that. So um it is so important to really highlight that legacy. Imagine uh the impact that she had just from going over there.
Yeah, I mean, it gives me chills, still, like when I think about it. And then, to know that she knew that one of her fellowship people was one of the babies at the camp that she
Yeah.
helped, like it was just such a beautiful kind of full circle again moment. And yeah, just really honored that I was able to shine a light on her in that way. And you
Mm,
too. I mean, what an incredible experience to hear that story.
right. Did you get to meet her in person? I'm not quite aware if exactly what year she passed away, but
Yeah, she passed away late last year, and no, unfortunately, I didn't get to. She just was at a point in her life where she was just too, ill to be able to go out and meet her fellowship people. But she used to in the past. My mentor was able to meet her when he did the fellowship, like I think 20 years ago or whatever. So, yeah, it's just this the connections that just keep coming. I wish I could have, but I did share with Kathy the magazine article that showed a picture of me with the award, and I sent it to Kathy to show to the Carters to show them that, like, hey, one of us made it out.
one of us made it out. We're doing well, and we're bringing it back to highlight how amazing and important that was.
Yeah, so that was really special. And yeah, she and Kathy at the time was still visiting the Carters pretty often.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's amazing. Um, looking back at, the rest of the articles that you have written, uh, what would you say is your near and dearest, your favorite out of all of them? Most impactful. I know that's hard to I know that's a hard question to answer, but let's say if you were to pick one that really just represents yeah, your favorite out of all of them.
You mean like in the within the mental health landscape?
Within the mental health
Hmm.
landscape, especially within the
Yeah.
Cambodian American space, yeah.
I would have to say it was my visit to Siri in
Mhm,
Oakland. It was, I mean, you could hear what it was like for me to be there, like the excitement in my voice, interviewing the clients and meeting everybody. And you could hear, yeah, like they have a kitchen there and the elders were cooking Khmer food,
mhm.
and her name was Ming Sopal. She was like the wrangler, and so like just hanging out in the kitchen, watching elders making Khmer food, and having those sounds in the story, being able to just sit with them on the floor and talk to them and listen to them. Um, I think, and then showing that there can be something done to help, that
Mhm,
there is a program that really, really works, and how amazing that program is. Um, yeah, Siri actually just moved to a new location in Oakland, a much bigger location. And
mhm.
I talked to one of their volunteers there today, actually just to get an update, like how's everything going since you guys moved there. And it's been really great for them. It just keeps growing, and they're doing well. They just got $1 million grant, so they're
Mm,
not scrambling anymore. They can kind of really focus on the connections and the service. So I'm really happy that I was able to shine a light on them.
yeah, yeah. I'm curious too, with all the work that you've done, highlighting and learning about the effects of the Khmer Rouge and the mental health issues, how has that affected your relationship with your parents, if at all, right? Because you mentioned that, you didn't realize how bad it was until you really kind of went down this road. Because I can speak from experience when I started learning just well, interviewing my dad. So I feel like I did it kind of the backhand way, but interviewing my dad and learning about the experiences through him, it changed the way that I viewed him. And I can imagine you interviewing these other survivors and seeing and hearing how horrific it was and how the nightmares have still carried on. Um, I'm sure you couldn't have helped but think like, oh my gosh, uh, how did my parents survive and your relationship with them?
Yeah, I think it definitely deepened my understanding of, you know, what they've gone through, kind of by osmosis almost,
Mhm.
and it actually made me want to understand more about those details from them, their personal story. So I also had sat down pretty recently with my dad and kind of gotten his story on tape for the first time.
Mm,
And I was able to, yeah, to kind of understand how the family was able to move from place to place. And um I understood a little bit more about, my grandpa on my dad's side, and kind of his relationship to the Khmer Rouge, and how he was forced to work for them, and but in a way it kind of helped the family survive. So it was like all these different parts of our family story that I never knew before, that I wouldn't have asked, if I hadn't been able to report and do that kind of in-depth reporting with other people. That I think it
yeah.
helped me kind of formulate questions from my own family.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you find through the process of interviewing all these survivors and even interviewing your father that you found a sense of maybe the start of healing of some sort?
Yeah, I mean, there was a point where I was angry, that we've been through all of this, and that there's hasn't been a whole lot of help around
Yeah.
it. There was a point where, when I saw how much people suffered, yeah, I felt really angry, because I was like, there's not adequate help. There's no adequate language help, for people. They need me to take time, to go meet them, in order just to get adequate care. So I think being able to do this kind of reporting, just gave me more empathy for, not just the people suffering, but also, like, the healthcare system is so far behind, that it's going to take so long for it to even begin to catch up to what it needs. And not just Cambodian refugees, any kind of culturally sensitive group that needs mental health care.
Mhm.
We're going to be seeing, a lot of Gazans, who need it. The Siri has actually, um, really increased their services to Afghanis, and that was from, what happened, with the war. Um, so offering culturally appropriate care for mental health is so crucial. We are so far behind on where we need to be. But I'm grateful that the reporting I did help me kind of see that there was a light there. In the series that I did for the Carter Center, I highlighted a place in Fresno that served, Hmong immigrants,
Mhm.
in that same kind of way that Siri does for Cambodians and Afghanis. And there's a special program here in Fresno that really focuses on, culturally sensitive mental health care for Hmong people and the community here. And it really works for them. So it's over and over again, I'm seeing that, there's an answer. We just have to mobilize and understand the nuances of what each culture needs. It's
Mhm.
different I mean, Americanized healthcare is not it's not for everybody.
Right. Right.
Every culture is so different, and you have to understand those nuances to be able to offer the appropriate care.
Right, right. Even the talks of therapy. Therapy is very much a Western method of mental health. It's a Western approach. Whereas the healing, community healing that you mentioned, and um, movement and other ways of healing are more popular from what I hear um, in the Eastern Asian communities. So,
Yeah.
um, no, I agree with you 1000% that there needs to be more resources in order to cater to these people and do this correctly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like the Hmong program here, the community gardens a lot. So they actually have a whole community garden that's space that's dedicated
Hmm.
um, to elders, So stuff like that, that you can really only understand if you're Hmong and are from that culture.
Right, right. So you feel like you've seen improvements, Surya, right? I mean,
Yeah, I've really seen well, first of all, the conversation around mental health care is not as stigmatized as it used to be.
mhm,
Um, it's in, and I found that across the board, and especially in culturally diverse places like Fresno or Oakland, that a place like Siri has made a culture where it's okay to seek healthcare, seek mental health care, that people are not going to think you're crazy.
mhm,
They've normalized the need to, yeah, to take care of your mental health in that way. And yeah, it's really breaking that kind of stigma. It's the same thing in the Fresno program for Hmong people.
mhm,
They call it the happy house, is what they call it, in Hmong. It's not the crazy house, or and so
yeah,
they've shifted the culture and a conversation around mental health
mhm,
with creating these spaces.
yeah. What about the second generation? I know that you've focused a lot on kind of the refugees themselves, and a lot of your reporting has been around that the refugees themselves. Have you been able to learn or report on second generations, and if so, what have you seen within that space?
Yeah, a lot of same themes coming up. It's that we're starting from a different starting point.
Hmm.
Either you're coming to this country not really knowing English, um, or in a lot of cases, you're kind of dumped into low income housing areas. And
Hmm.
so you're automatically exposed to increased criminal activity, gang activity, drug activity, and you're more susceptible to that. So what I found was that, a lot of people coming up in the 1.5 generation or the second generation, they're being arrested, they're being deported, and these are people who don't even speak, being exposed to these crimes because of just where they've landed in
Right,
life.
right,
A lot of guys especially have had to join gangs just to, survive the neighborhood, and
right.
that leads to all kinds of things. So there's so many disadvantages that have come from just being an immigrant to this country. um you know and then, when you're exposed to that kind of thing, you're also more susceptible to maybe doing drugs or gambling, or all sorts of other things that just lead you down a road that really decreases your quality of life. And so I've seen it both ways, where within the same family, you can have two completely different kids. Like one kid has turned to gang life, and another kid, to kind of combat that or overcorrect, is like the perfect kid. But
Mhm.
they're also kind of overcompensating in a detrimental way, and kind of putting too much on their shoulders to carry. Um, so, one of the family that I interviewed, that was exactly the case. Nancy, she was the youngest, and she saw two of her sisters die. She saw one of her brothers be deported. She saw, others get involved in criminal activity, and this was all happening right before her eyes, and nothing that she could do. And so she's kind of, um, in reaction, kind of found peace in spirituality and being more involved in the temple.
Mm.
um and she's found a way to kind of cope with it all. But her family was just an example of just one family of, kind of what can happen when you're kind of put in circumstances that are beyond your control.
Right, right. Do you currently have any specific articles that focus on the second generation and that whole topic?
Yeah, that was my, Carter Center Fellowship
Mm.
story, and it was, I think it was like a big long audio story, so it was like a good 16 minutes or so. And then, yeah, the article kind of moving through Nancy's story, and showcasing that Fresno program, that
Mhm.
helped Hmong people. Kind of, this is something that's working in Fresno, um, yeah, and just kind of how Nancy's kind of coped with it, and found her way to have peace, in the midst of all this turmoil with her siblings. A lot of tragedies in that family.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's not the first, that I've heard of family situations, and I think it is unfortunately quite common, as you mentioned, just because of where our families have landed, and, hopefully putting more light to it at least is able to educate the second generation, um, as to why things have been the way they have been. And
Yeah,
a huge passion of mine, and I think something we both have in common is just the recognition of storytelling and how powerful it can be. And so, I I just I really commend your work and the fact that you have been able to report and really educate people about what is happening within our community.
thank
Um,
you.
Soreath, what do you think is next for you?
Yeah, right now I've taken a bit of a break from journalism, and that's just, to take care of family stuff. My parents are getting older, and it's harder for them to run the shop, and so I've been there. And I've been, actually, completing my Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at Fresno State, and
Mm.
it's been really wonderful to be part of a writing community and kind of focus my writing in a new kind of way, outside of journalism, kind of a more personal kind of storytelling around my own family story on, how my parents kind of came to the country, and delving into the donut industry, what it's been like to kind of be a donut kid is what I say.
Yeah, correct. I am a donut kid too.
Yeah.
Fellow donut kids unite.
Yeah, yeah. It's really something specific to be a donut kid. And so it's, kind of going back and writing through what that means, not just for me, but for our culture. It's a big thing. And yeah, and so I'm kind of working on that, and just working at the donut shop. So if you're ever in Fresno, come on by. I'm probably going to be there.
Shout out. What is the name of the donut shop that you are currently at, Surya?
It's called Sprinkles Donuts. We're right in Fresno, and it's a little far from the 99 if you're coming on the highway, but I think it's worth the drive. And then you get to meet me.
Yes, that is definitely the most important part. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on here, Surya, just talking about your journey in journalism, your passions as to, why you've written the articles you've written. I mean, clearly they have struck a chord with the general public, with the awards that you have won. And quite honestly, you know, we need more people like you in field of journalism and writing and content creation in general. It's I feel at least that our culture is coming into what we call a Khmer Renaissance. I think for the first time, uh, a lot of us are able to have the space to really process what had happened back in the 70s because we're not the refugees themselves. We were able to kind of have a little bit more processing time, I guess you can say, to really take and the mental capacity to understand that oh whoa, like what happened there, and really question it and share that with the world. So
Yeah.
thank you for what you do. It is so important, these articles that you write, and I hope that you continue to share your story, share your family story. Our community needs it and deserves it.
Thank you so much, Dorothea. It's so meaningful and touching to me that you reached out and that you gave me space, to talk about what I feel so passionate about. And yeah, I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful to be here and to have met you. So, yes, thank you so, so much.
Yes. Before we close out, if anybody wanted to find you, Soreath, where can they find you and your work?
Yeah, so right now, I've been pretty derelict on social media. Um,
We'll just have people type out Soreath, and we
yeah,
will have the article.
I'm on Twitter, or what was Twitter? It's X. It's really where I post all my journalism stuff. Um, I'm going to get an Instagram, I think, at some point.
The donut shop takes a lot of time, trust me. So
It
it is.
does. Sprinkles Donuts Fresno. That's on Instagram. So
So everybody who wants to find Soreath, you can type her name in Google and or follow Sprinkles Donuts on Instagram, and you will find her there.
yeah.
But again, Soreath, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. I appreciate it.